So nice to see you and to meet you.
Nice to see you too. Thank you so much for the kind invitation.
Of course. So we're chatting today because Dr. Cazzola won the Society for Italian Historical Studies honorable mention for the Modern Italy Article Prize. Many, many congratulations.
Thank you very much. And I want to extend my thanks also to the other members of the prize committee. Thank you.
Wonderful. We were just delighted to read your article. The article is entitled The Strange Case of Dr. Giustiniani and Mr. Hirsch, The Incomplete History of an Imposture, 1790s to 1855, and it was published in Quaderni Storici in 2023. So today we'll be mainly talking about this article, but I'm also very curious to see how this article fits into your broader research agenda. So right now you're a postdoctoral researcher at the Max Planck Institute in Frankfurt. You've completed your PhD at the University of Bologna in 2019. And I'd love to start just by asking you how you came to the topic that you cover in your article.
Thank you very much for your question. So I studied the history of the British Empire, and I'm also part at the Max Planck Institute. I'm also part of a research group on the legal history of the British Empire. And over the past couple of years, I've especially investigated the policy of so-called Aboriginal protection. So like social legal stations, which open across some of the Australian colonies, starting from the late 1830s, in order to establish control over the indigenous population. I came across the figure of Louis Giustiniani while studying the kind of genealogy, the origins of the policy of Aboriginal protection in the colony of Western Australia. So Giustiniani was not personally involved in the establishment of the protected, but he kind of sort of performed the role of protector before the official establishment of Aboriginal protectors in the colony. And he also tried to apply for the position when the position was actually, when someone was actually appointed to the protectorate, but unsuccessfully. So he applied to the colonial office in London, and his request wasn't successful. But yeah, so I came across Giustiniani through British imperial history, and more particularly the history of Aboriginal protection.
Wonderful. Can you say a little bit more about how the topic relates to your PhD dissertation research?
Yes, sure. Thank you. So, for my PhD at the University of Bologna, I had especially studied the administrative thought of some administrators of the British Empire. And my current postdoctoral project on protective policies across the British imperial framework kind of relate to that. So I have now a stronger, at the moment, a stronger legal focus, a stronger focus on the legal history of the empire. And also, I should also add that my department at the Max Planck has an interesting legal biography. And they are especially interested in figures who performed legal roles, even though they were not legally trained, but who de facto performed a legal function despite their lack of formal legal education. And so last year, they had organized a conference on legal biography, and I participated in the conference, and I thought that Giustiniani was a cool figure to present. So I mostly focused on his time in Western Australia, because he spent 1.5 years in Western Australia in the mid-1830s. So I focused on that 1.5 years. And then when they decided to write a volume out of that conference on legal biographies, then of course I had to try to reconstruct his life also prior to and after his time in Western Australia. And so, I mean, problems arose, but also the actual fun, because I had the opportunity to, to delve into the life of a very unconventional man. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's so interesting how it all came about through, let's say, a rather standard biographical project that led you in really surprising directions. And I will say the article itself shows how much fun you had in the research process and really takes the reader along on this wonderful journey across many different countries and across the 3 different personas that this individual inhabited. So rather than maybe me trying to summarize a little bit about Giustiniani, could I ask you to tell us who was this figure? Why did he travel so widely? And what did you discover in the course of your research about him?
Thank you very much for this question. It's always fun to reconstruct, to retrace the biography of Giustiniani. So probably I should proceed in chronological order, even though my research did not proceed in chronological order, because as I mentioned, I started from the time of Giustiniani in Western Australia. It was in Western Australia from 1836 to 1838, when he was approximately, I think, in his 40s, early 40s, probably late 30s, early 40s. But if I have to proceed in chronological order, Giustiniani was actually born with the name of, with 2 different names, Jakab Hirsch, which was his German name, and Jakab Szarvas is a Hungarian name. He was born in Papa, a city in the late 18th century in the northwestern Hungarian territories of the Austrian Empire. And he was probably born sometime between 1794 and 1797. I mean, he was part of the, he was a Jewish man, a Jewish child. He was born to a Jewish family in Papa, and his family was pretty well off, I think. They were merchants. However, his dad went through economic difficulties, which, however, didn't prevent the young Jakob Hirsch from attending prominent local schools. And more particularly, as there was no Jewish school in Papa, he attended Christian schools, a Calvinist school first and a Catholic school afterwards. I know what happened to him more or less through his, education at these schools until approximately he was probably 15. And then I lost track of him, so I don't know what happened for a few years. And I found him again in Italy. In 1822, he converted to the Catholic faith in Rome, in the hospice of, in a hospice known as House of Catechumens and Neophytes, which opened in the late 16th century in Rome to prepare Jewish people, but also Muslim people and enslaved people to be baptized within the Catholic Church. And in the act of conversion, he abandoned his previous name, Jakab Hirsch or Jakab Szarvas, and he adopted the new name of Luigi Giustiniani. I also know that he was consecrated. I mean, he was ordained a priest, subdeacon, so a cleric, in 1826 in Rome also. And afterwards, he moved to Florence. He lived 2.5 years in Florence. He also entered, I think, a Dominican convent. He lived by, I think, teaching privately. And then he moved to the Swiss Confederation, first Lausanne and then Geneva. It was in Geneva that he converted to Protestantism. So he recanted Catholicism before the Genevan Consistory. He embraced the Protestant faith, and afterwards he moved to Britain. There he also preached as a city missionary in London. He occasionally visited Paris. And then from there, he went to Western Australia. He joined the Church of England before leaving for Western Australia, because he went to Western Australia as an Anglican missionary. And after Western Australia, he very briefly resumed his residence in Britain. He probably traveled across Germany because some newspapers locate him in Germany in 1838, early 1839. Until he left for the US. So he disembarked, he landed in Philadelphia in 1839 together with his wife. And yeah, and while he was in the US, he also preached as a city missionary, most particularly to Germans, because he was a German native speaker, as a Lutheran missionary. And then he became also a quite famous / notorious anti-Catholic lecturer and mass converter. So he led masses, arguably, of German Catholics to recant Catholicism in several different cities in the late 1840s, early 1850s, and then he died in 1855 in Cincinnati. So he really had kind of a global life, and yeah, across many different jurisdictions.
It's extraordinary. So many different places and names and religious faiths and activities under all of those different moments and spaces that he inhabited. So the research clearly was not straightforward for a figure who was constantly changing his name, changing his location, and so forth. Tell us a little bit about how you pieced together this story and how you were able to figure out that these apparently 3 different people were in fact one and the same.
Thank you very much for this question also. So yeah, I also wanted to say that I really appreciated the citation where you define this research process as a tour de force, because this was actually how it felt. Also because I took many red herrings, especially at the beginning. So what I did, so I started from Giustiniani's time in Western Australia, and there were a few information about himself that he divulged, and he emphasized, like that he was an Italian of great learning. He spoke many different languages. He had pursued university studies. He belonged to, he was born to an aristocratic family in Rome, etc., etc. So what I initially did was to simply trust the actor, the historical actor. And he also wrote an autobiography in the early 1840s, where he emphasized again this information. These pieces of information, some of them are true, some others are false. But of course, it took quite some time in order to understand which were the true ones and which were the false ones. What is really interesting of this autobiography that he wrote is that he also included some certificates. So he probably was aware that his self-refashioning could kind of raise doubts in his interlocutors. So this is why I think he included certificates in his autobiography. So I initially tried, so I basically had 2 kind of parallel searches. So on the one hand, I proceeded with a digital search. So I tried to mine several newspaper databases. So databases of digitized newspapers published in Europe in the first half of the 19th century. And I must say that most countries have like really amazing databases. And I intentionally used like misspelled versions of Giustiniani's name and surname. As you know, his like new name was Luigi, but then he anglicized it as Louis when he moved to Britain, and this Louis was spelled in very different names, in very different ways. Also, Giustiniani itself is not as straightforward as it can sound to an Italian speaker. So, I mean, in Anglophone sources was also spelled differently. And these newspapers were very useful because they helped me like sketch a chronology of when he was where. Because they really kind of located him, they fixed him in a specific location at a specific point in time. And the parallel search that I did, that which is related to his autobiography and his the certificates that he included in this autobiography, was the kind of authenticity check of those certificates that he included. So he included like a university, like a degree certificate, allegedly from the Gregorian University of Rome. He included his conversion certificate before the Genevan Consistory, so his conversion from Catholicism to Protestantism. So I mean, many different documents, and some of these are actually like basically accurate copies of the originals, like the conversion certificate before the Genevan Consistory, which was extremely accurate, and some others I suspect that they are like forged because I couldn't find any archival evidence. Then, I mean, after these, then of course, after the digital search, I had to turn to archival research. I was also lucky enough to reach out to many archivists who were who very generously sent me reproductions of archival materials, while other archival documents, of course, required on-site visits. And yeah, and at some point, a document came to light, which was like apparently, like seemingly like unremarkable. So in his autobiography, Giustiniani repeatedly said that he had dealt during his time in Florence. So he spent in Florence 2 years. He repeatedly had to do with the Florence police. And I mean, the police is really I don't want to say a recurring topic, but he really mentions it quite a few times. And so I thought, I mean, where could I find like documents related to the Florentine police? And it turned out that the collection of Buon Governo at the Florence State Archives have like old materials regarding the police. I knew the years where Giustiniani was in Florence, and yeah, and in those documents there was this letter which he addressed to the police, asking permission to teach privately. But there was also like a note on the margin, a handwritten one, and the note said that he was a neophyte Jew, so someone recently converted from Judaism to Catholicism. And it also took me probably 3 weeks in order to understand the handwriting, even though it was in my own native tongue. So I really went back to that document many times because I couldn't understand the marginal note, until I finally managed to understand what it said. And these neophyte Jew activated mental associations, and so the House of Catechumens and Neophytes in Rome seemed the ideal place where something related to Giustiniani could be found, and this was actually the case.
Fascinating. Thanks for walking me through that. And I hope that the journey is helpful for young scholars too, who are hoping to emulate or tell another story about a similarly complicated figure. And it's very, very instructive to know how patient and thorough it's important to be, and how you trusted your hunches. Yeah, and lucky, sure, as you made your way through all of these different materials and sources. So your story touches potentially on many different historiographical conversations. I was curious to start with Italy, which is not quite maybe how you entered this project, but after all, this is an Italian Studies Prize. So how would you say this history changes what we thought we knew about Italy, you know, pre-unification? What kind of new way of thinking about the early 19th century does this provide for scholars of Italian history?
I know that many scholars have are recently putting like Italian history in a broader context. Probably, I mean, the first thing, I'm not an Italian history also scholar myself. But I guess that probably the first step would be to put history within a wider European, especially South European, and probably Mediterranean context, and then to enlarge the focus to Europe and the world. I think that these kind of in a kind of unconventional way, this article probably puts Italian history in a broader perspective also, but relating Italian history with Eastern Europe, with the Pacific, with Australia, with Britain, and then with the US. So probably, I mean, it might be seen as an article which contributes to the current scholarly effort to enlarge the perspective, but maybe probably emphasizing, highlighting connections between Italy and contexts which might not be always seen in relation with Italy. So this is probably like a contribution to Italian history. Another thing which really struck me as sort of relevant while researching Giustiniani is that he was really he really embraced his Italian identity, his allegedly Italian identity. And it really seemed to play like a huge role in the way in which he thought about his new life and the way in which he presented himself. And kind of my impression was that he really used his refashioned Italian identity as a pass to, in order to be accepted in new societies, as it happened in Western Australia. Of course, his alleged Italian identity was not the only thing that he said about himself. Of course, he also said that he belonged to an aristocratic family. So, I mean, all of these features, that he was close to the Pope and in general to the Roman church hierarchy. And all of these features together really contributed to making him the Italian of great learning that he wanted to appear. So, yeah, I'm not. I mean, I'm not aware of other case studies where the Italian identity was historically weaponized in order to refashion oneself, but I'm sure that there must be, and probably I'm sure that other scholars have, unveiled many other cases.
Yeah, fascinating to think about an alleged Italian identity being used as a way to boost one's reputation and at the same time hide the previous, identity that lay beforehand. So that's very fascinating. How else would you situate the historiographical importance of your article vis-a-vis the literatures that you saw yourself as engaging in deeply? The article touches on questions of the histories of religion and religious conversion. It touches on histories of identity and the importance of studying tricksters like Giustiniani in history. If you were to just say a few words to scholars about other interventions that you see your article as making, what would you highlight?
So yeah, probably it's the article can tell something about identity. So how, I mean, something that we already know about identity, that identity is a very elusive thing, which, I mean, which comprises many different elements, which can be more or less important depending on the individual. And I think that the article further demonstrates this thing that we already know about identity. Giustiniani identity was really multifaceted. I mean, there was nationality. I mean, his Italianness. There was religion. His Catholic faith, and of course, he never explicitly said that he was like a neophyte Jew. There was language. I mean, he said many, I mean, the fact that he was proficient in many different languages, both ancient and modern, was a big thing for him, which he constantly emphasized. And the only language which he never mentioned was Hungarian. And I'm sure that it was, I mean, it must have been one of his native languages. So, I mean, identity stresses some features, but also conceals others. His lineage, the fact that he was allegedly born to an aristocratic family in Rome. So this elusiveness of identity kind of reflects also on the elusiveness of identification techniques. Giustiniani was born and lived in an age where nation states were reinforcing border controls, but also like devising new identification techniques in order to document and verify individuals' identities. And Giustiniani, on the one hand, lived in a very fluid regime of manifold names, many religions, conversion, attempts at naturalization, which always failed, as far as I know. But at the same time, he also tried to, he took the identification situation seriously, because he forged documents, he forged some of them were actually accurate, but most of them, I believe, were faked. But the fact that he included in his autobiography all of these certificates probably shows that he really took bureaucracy seriously, and in his deception, he kind of played the game of deception according to the rules that were imposed by the states that he had to crisscross. So yeah, and in this sense, also identification becomes elusive in a way. Yeah. So.
So it's such a rich article, and I'm sure you didn't have any trouble placing it. I was curious to ask you a little bit about the process of working with Quaderni Storici and the ways you moved this from a draft to an article ready for submission, and then finally to the final product.
Thank you. Thank you also for these questions. So while writing the article, the biggest challenge was how to recount the story. So how to which order I should adopt in order to tell the story. And I decided to opt for the order of the actual research process, which became important in a way only retrospectively, only in light of the outcome, because probably if I had just confirmed what Giustiniani used to say about himself, the research project would have been less interesting than it actually turned out to be. I mean, I was able to contradict some of the information that Giustiniani said about him, recounted about himself. So in the writing process, the major challenge was the actual order of my exposition, and then the publication process was extremely smooth. I had a very, very good experience with Quaderni Storici. I was also lucky enough that the article got published in an issue on lost archives. I am not part of the special issue. This article is not part of the special issue, but it's in the same volume, and I think it was a lucky coincidence. And all the other articles are excellent. So it's good to be in that volume. And also the revision process was extremely good, and actually both reviewers stressed the fact that I had to explain the process more carefully. So I think that the reviewers were very kind in highlighting the fact that the article could be stronger if I really took some more space in order to recount the research process, and the editors were also pretty generous in letting me go slightly beyond the initial word limit in order to carefully say which databases I had consulted, where I found what, and that was a good exercise for me. But I think that, yeah, I think that it actually made the final article stronger.
Wonderful, absolutely, and it gives future scholars a roadmap to follow to understand again what they might do if they have a similarly challenging research question that they're looking to answer. So just as my last question for you, Matilde, I was curious about your future research directions. Are you done with Giustiniani? Are you moving on to other individuals, other questions? Tell us a little bit about what's ahead.
So thank you. And so yeah, my current project, I went back to protective policies within the British imperial framework at the moment, and I moved to the Strait settlements, so and more particularly colonial Singapore. But I don't want to abandon Giustiniani because I believe that there's much more. I mean, that the article itself is full of gaps that needs to be and holes that needs to be filled in. And so I believe that, further archival research might unveil other information about Giustiniani. So I would really like, in the fall, but more particularly next year, go down the rabbit hole once again and try to find out more, especially about Giustiniani's university education, which I was not able to, I was not able to find any evidence of that, but I'm pretty sure that he pursued university studies. And yeah, I have many different options in my head. And I would really like to find something. So yeah, I'm not done with Giustiniani, but I must also say that it was a standalone project in a way.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so glad you did jump into that rabbit hole, and it's been such a pleasure to talk to you, Matilde. I wish you all the best with your future research, and congratulations again on receiving this prize. It was really an absolute honor for the committee to read your article and learn from you, and we all look forward to following your work in the future.
Thank you so much, Juliana, and thanks once again to the other members of the prize committee, and a big thanks also to the Society for Italian Historical Studies. It was a great honor and a great pleasure to have this conversation with you today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Ciao, buona serata.
Grazie,
Bye.
ciao. Ciao.
Bye.